Hi, this is Ned Siegfried from Siegfried and Jensen. As proud sponsors of BeliefCast, we hope you are inspired by Todd's weekly podcasts, which contain so many courageous stories of recovery and personal growth. Remember, it's not what happened in the past that matters, it's what happens in the future. We invite you all to work hard and be optimistic about your future. Enjoy today's podcast.
And we are back. This is Todd Sylvester with the Todd Inspires Belief Cast. Thank you once again for tuning in and for all your support and believing in me. I'd like to give a shout out to my sponsors, Wasatch Recovery, Siegfried and Jensen, Thread Wallets. And I want to give a shout out to my good friend, Paul Cardall. He's a award-winning pianist, and his music is what you heard at the beginning of the show and at the end. And he's been on my show a few times, so I want to thank him for being willing to let us use his music. He's a phenomenal person. And I want to thank again all my guests who have been on previously. If it wasn't for you, we wouldn't be where we're at. And today's going to be no different. Today we are joined by Cindy Benezra. Did I say that right?
Benezra,
yes.
Yeah.
So Cindy, man, I'm telling you, you have quite the story. You have quite the platform. And first of all, I just want to say before we get into some of the stuff, I want you to know that I really do admire the way you carry yourself after what you've been through.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
truly. You know, you are the author of the memoir, Under the Orange Blossoms. In that book, there's a beautiful quote that I want to share. It's by Laurel Hamilton. There are wounds that never show on the body that are deeper and more hurtful than anything that bleeds. Wow. We're going to get more into that and what that actually means. Cindy is an author, speaker, a sexual abuse advocate, a mom, a wife. She helps people. She's doing everything she can to bring light to people who are going through the same thing and being there as a support, a help, and to help them get through that as well. She also is a co-founder of the luxury event company where she spends much of her time creating beautiful spaces. Her and her husband currently reside in Seattle, Washington, and she's the parents of 4 beautiful children. She has been through so much that I don't even know where to start. We were talking about that earlier. What are we going to talk about? There's so much. We could do a couple hours of this, but why don't we start, Cindy, with tell us about where you grew up and a little bit about your childhood.
Sure. So originally from California, San Francisco, and my mom is an immigrant. Well, actually, she's second generation Mexican. No. Oh, take that back. She's first generation Mexican.
Okay.
And growing up in San Francisco, and my dad is from Germany, and so he is an immigrant here in this country. And my parents moved to Arizona because my mom was an asthmatic and she was just looking for warmer climates instead of that foggy climate in San Francisco. And so we lived in the rural parts of Arizona and in South Mountain, actually. And back then in the 70s, it was a lot of farming community over there. And it was like butt up to a country club. And it was kind of like a mixed neighborhood. A lot of middle income people starting their young families. And every day I rode my bicycle, open wide streets, nothing to be afraid of. New development. And in our neighborhood, it was a lot of also immigrants too, starting and coming up too. So it was all new. And I don't know, I just remember swimming a lot, playing Barbie dolls, having wide open fields, playing kickball in the evening under, a big tall lamp with the neighbor kids. And I was just a regular kid. And from the outside, everybody probably thought I was just your average kid, and you just don't know what happens. My mom was beautiful, very well poised, educated. My dad too. Both of them worked incredibly hard. They had like 2, 3, sometimes 4 jobs. They would just do anything to make money. So I knew hard work. My mom put my dad through grad school, and she would sew on the side and try to make extra money to put my dad through grad school, and then type up his papers and on those old-fashioned typewriters,
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Where they had, yeah.
Yep.
I remember going to sleep to that, her sewing and typing to the wee hours of the night.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it was Arizona, cactuses and sunrises and Barbie dolls and swimming pools. So yeah,
Yeah, and a lot of heat, right?
a lot of heat. Yeah, crazy temperatures. I couldn't believe it. And back then we had the black asphalt where
Oh
it
yeah.
do you recall that?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. You don't want to take a spill on your bicycle with that stuff on the ground.
No, you don't, man. And that does
No.
bring back a lot of memories when you say that. And it's funny, my brother, he doesn't live there anymore, but he lived in Cave Creek, Arizona, and we would go visit him. And we
Uh-huh.
usually would go around November, and it'd be like 80 degrees on Thanksgiving, or that time of year. I'm going, this is crazy how warm it is, and here we are, it's November.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
so you had a fairly normal childhood on the outside until I guess it wasn't, and things that were going on behind the scenes. And I know there's so much to talk about today, Cindy. So let's just get right to it. I
Okay.
know that there's a reason why you're a sexual abuse advocate now. Why don't you
Mhm.
share with our listeners? I know this is a heavy story, but share with us, kind of what you started to deal with as a young child.
Sure. So you never know what happens behind closed doors. We had this old-fashioned saying, and I think it probably still runs true to this day.
Hmm.
Whatever happens in our household stays in our household. That this is our family business,
Yeah, right.
and that gets pretty ingrained in your head pretty young. I don't know if it's necessarily that way now because my kids share everything that happens in our family, or maybe it's just different way of parenting. So I'm not really sure on that. But in our household, it was whatever stays in this household, it stays within these walls.
Right.
And we were pretty respectful kids. My dad, well, actually, he was kind of a tyrant. And so I was
Mhm.
scared. I was scared. He had a
Yeah.
big booming voice. He was a little bit of not a little bit, he was a narcissist.
Yeah.
And he kind of commanded the household. My mom was very demure. Um, so it was just my sister and I. And from the age of 5, I was sexually abused by my father
Mm.
until I was 10.
Wow.
And the reason why it stopped at 10 is my dad, I would consider him, textbook um, pedophile. So he was not interested in older children. He was interested
Okay.
in younger children.
Mm.
So at 10, I started to go through puberty, and I think maybe I became more human or relatable. I don't know. I'm projecting. I don't know. But it's something in there, something stopped. And
Yeah.
in that
Okay.
process from 10 on up, honestly, until this day, I'm just, yeah, I'm 60. So until this day, I still have, it's been a journey to heal from these very, very pivotal years. Because in those are 5 to 10, you're really developing, you're becoming,
Yeah.
you're trying to figure out who you are in this world, emotionally, psychologically, you're trying, and you're getting your personality. And so
Yeah.
I believed in my world that the world was a very, very scary place, that I could not trust adults, that
Sure.
I could only rely on myself and my intuition. And it was a frightening place to be. And years it took me to kind of, in a sense, reprogram,
Yeah.
change my mindset, change everything about this initial thinking of what happened to me as a kid. My
Yeah.
father was also very, he was physical. He was physically abusive.
Mm.
Um, he used to be able to control us by saying things like, well, you don't want to hurt, if you say anything, I'm going to hurt your mother, or I'm going to hurt your sister. So I was, and I love my parents. I mean, I really do love my sister, my
Sure.
mom, and they meant
Yeah.
everything to me in the world.
Yeah.
So I did not want them hurt. And I thought I'd rather, not to be the martyr, but in my mind, I thought, well, I'd rather take the burden on than have my mother and my sister affected
Right.
by this.
For sure.
So it really held me. And he knew my dad was a very manipulative person, and he knew what would hold me. And my mom was very afraid of working. She didn't really believe that she could work, back in the 70s.
Yeah.
Most women did not really support themselves. So
Right.
she was terrified of not having a roof over her head. And he would often remind me, like, if you say something, you may lose all your friends, whatever that I was familiar with. You lose your friends, you lose your house, your mom will be on the streets. You would have a jailbird father, which I didn't even,
Yeah.
that was a terrible thing. I only heard about,
Yeah.
people being incarcerated. I never really thought about a family member being incarcerated. So I was like, oh, and so then I started carrying shame. And then there was just compiled levels of that. And again, I'm 5, 6, 7,
Yeah.
like I'm going through these years, and it was a lot to handle. It really was. In fact, it was unbearable later on. It was just unbearable.
Well, the thought, one of the questions I have, and I know you were basically threatened not to say anything. Did anyone suspect, or did your mom maybe notice something was off? I mean, did anyone know, or was it just like, this was all secret?
Well, in hindsight, I don't know how anybody would not know. I don't know. Again, I parent very, very differently now. I think
Sure.
also we have a lot more awareness. We're talking about these things now. So I think there's a lot more awareness. I think my mom was in denial. I think she lived her life in fear. And so I don't know how she would know. And later on, I do go and I tell her, and I'll share a little bit about that. Maybe you could remind me later on how
Yes.
I
Yeah.
shared what that was like. And
Absolutely.
so I do share, but I just don't know how. I mean, I had bruises on me, and I would go to school. I was failing school. Teachers would bring us in, and they just couldn't put the whole thing together. I don't know. I mean, I was a kid. It's all guessing. I
Yeah.
don't know what happened in this broken system, but yeah, it's pretty tragic. And I know it happens still to this day. I think we catch things a little bit quicker, but
Sure.
what do we do with it is really like
Yeah.
kind of where I am today. Like, what do we do with this? Because it
Right.
is a broken system.
Well, and that's what I love about the vulnerability, and just you're a voice now, and it's amazing how you're not afraid to talk to anyone and everyone. But obviously that didn't happen overnight.
No, I
Um,
didn't.
so tell us about kind of the struggles and the battles on top of what you went through, because I know you've been through some other things as well. Just
Hmm.
talk about some of that, and then how you transitioned to being this voice for those who struggle.
Well, I have to say, as a kid, I was a spunky kid, but I was also pretty quiet and introverted. So I do have those two sides to my personality. So I did have time to be introspective, mainly because I had to force myself because I really didn't trust anybody. And that was the reason I would get abused, or I would get, sexually abused or
Mhm.
physically abused. And I didn't know who to turn to because I
Yeah.
felt the world just was not looking out for me like adults. And
Yeah.
I would get on my bike, and the reason why the bike is, when you exercise and you pump all your anger into something,
Right.
um, I would just ride as hard as I can and ride into the orchard fields. And that's where the orange blossoms were. And I'd ride in there, and I was sweaty and hot and mad, and I couldn't scream
Yeah.
or act out. So I would go into the trees, and I would just scream my head off, and,
Mm.
pound the dirt, and,
Yeah.
get mad at earth and the trees. And because I felt like they were the only ones that could trust me. I felt that nature had a responsibility. Especially those orange trees, they produce fruit. They produce beautiful blossoms. I watched them grow in the mud, and I thought, well, I'm living in the mud, then I could survive this. Like, I could trust nature. And so I would look at nature, I would listen to it. And if you want to call it meditating or prayer, I was able to, I think, get really connected to a higher source or a higher power.
Yeah.
And to each their own, but that was sort of like a connection that I've always felt internally. But through these times, that was my time where I could find sanctuary and really connect with something greater than myself. And I recognized that really young, that I'm a little ant in this world. And I don't know, sometimes I think about that. That's like a big concept, but some maybe in desperation at that moment, in those times where I really looked and I thought, there is something beyond me and I will get through this. I don't know how I'm going to get through this because I didn't know any examples of how to get through this. But
wow, that's amazing. You know, and did that bring you a little bit of peace though, feeling like there is someone or something greater than you in those moments? Did it feel like, okay, that can at least help me move a little bit forward here?
Yeah, I wasn't even sure what it was, to be honest. That's the craziest part. I'm just a kid, so I didn't even know what that thing was inside me that was stirring, that connected me, that grounded me, that I relied on. And it just sort of became almost like an intuition, a voice in my head, a feeling that if I really thought about it, I could connect to it. And it was the thing that never left my side. It would get through me. It was the thing that always stuck with me. Yeah.
Wow. Well, you mentioned that you have a story about sharing this with your mom. I'd love to hear that. And also, was she the first person you told?
She was the first person I told. I could still picture in my head. We were living in Arizona at the time. So I lived around the world a little bit, but I was living in Arizona at the time. And I remember looking down at my mom's beautiful brown neat legs, because we're always in shorts or in a dress. My mom was very proper. And I remember looking down because I couldn't look in her face and tell her what was happening. And what was happening, and this is basically how I told her. I just said, Mom, Dad comes into my bed at night. And I remember I couldn't see her face, but I just remember like the sweat on my body and thinking like, now what's going to happen? And she did ask questions. She was more like clarifying, like, what do you mean? What are you saying? What do you, because my parents would say good night. They would kiss us good night. They would read a story, so she wasn't really sure. So I got where she was trying to clarify. And I took out a picture that my father took of me. So my dad had, I don't know what you would call that. He was, abusive in the sense that he would take pictures of me, and that child pornography is sexual abuse.
Right.
So he would take me out of my bed, go and take pictures, dress me up, go and take pictures of me in the middle of the night. Sometimes I was smiling, sometimes I was not. He would tell me how to pose. It was really quick. Over time, as equipment became more elaborate, I just remember thinking, like, this doesn't hurt. I mean, physically, this is quiet. I don't have to do anything sexually. So I went along with it. But I do have to say, being up in the middle of the night took its toll on me in school. I was very confused by it. So anyway, I showed my mom the picture, And it was me on a kind of like a faux bearskin rug. And it was underneath the Christmas tree. And I happened to have the Christmas presents around me. And my dad said, hey, this is going to be, I think this picture is so beautiful. I think this is going to be our Christmas card. So I showed it to my mom thinking that this was going
Yeah.
to be our Christmas card. And
Wow.
my mom, that I do remember looking up at my mom's face, and she just went in a tirade. She goes, where did you get this? And how often does this happen? And I'm trying to tell her the story, but she's rifling
Oh
through
man.
his office, and I
Yeah.
knew where the shoebox where all the pictures were. So she pulls down the pictures and she just throws them all up in the air, and she starts crying and ripping up the pictures and grabbing my face and looking at me and
Oh
like going, oh
man.
my God, oh my God.
Yeah.
Long story short, my mom did leave my dad. And way back in the day in the 70s, there really wasn't even a kit for sexual abuse victims. There
Right.
wasn't a like a true women's shelters.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, a lot, it would be kind of surprising. A lot of what we think rights for women were not completely in place for women and children as they are today. So we've come a long way,
Yeah,
but personally, I feel that we haven't come far enough to protect people.
for sure.
But
How old were you when you told your mom? How old were you? Do you remember?
uh, okay, so I have to say anywhere from 7 to 10 is kind of a blur. So I'm always saying things out of sequence because I really don't know, but I'm gonna
Okay.
guess anywhere from like 7, 8, or maybe it's 8, 9. I don't know
Gotcha. I was just
anymore.
curious. Yeah.
Yeah, I know to write the book, I actually had to sit down and write a timeline with somebody,
Right.
actually with my therapist, and sit down and like go backwards and try to figure out exactly
Yeah.
what the dates and look at pictures, which was just an awful experience. But
I can imagine.
anyway,
Wow.
we went into the shelter, and
Hmm.
my dad, was still in communication with my mom, and my mom didn't feel that we should be living in a shelter. I mean, I guess it's extremely taboo. I mean,
Right.
extremely taboo. When we lived in the barrio, I remember it was right next to the border of Mexico, and I had never experienced this. And Latin community is very welcoming, so everybody was my aunt, everybody's my uncle, and everybody was my cousin. I was like,
Yeah.
"This is cool. I love this experience."
Exactly.
But
Yeah.
yeah, but
Mm.
but that didn't last long. And I came back into the house, and my dad promised that he would never touch me. And when they examined me, my hymen was intact. I had
Mm.
no broken bones. I
Yeah.
had some bruises. Oh well. Um, what else? It was his word against my word, and that's how it was back in the day. So I got
Mm.
put back into the household, and my mom believed my dad, and that just shattered my world. I mean, I can't even tell you, it broke belief systems, it broke so much.
Yeah.
But I love my mother, and I didn't have any other place to go, and I knew I was better staying at home than I wanted to run away. I would run away 1,000 times, but I would only get a few blocks down the road.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I got put back in the house. Yeah,
My goodness. And so, and then it continued for a little while, right?
it did
Longer.
continue for a while.
Yeah.
And during this time, and there is a little shame here. I'm going to share it though, because it's called homicidal ideation.
Yeah.
And I wanted my dad to stop. And my sister, my mom, they would joke about like, gosh, if your father ever got hit by, a bus, then, like make jokes. But I mean, it's a really grim
Yeah.
scenario to think about. And I
Yeah.
remember thinking like, my dad's a monster, and he has created havoc in this whole household, and he needs to stop, and he needs to stop touching me or
Yeah.
hitting me. And I thought, well, I'm going to take things in my own hands. And I actually and this is the part where I care a little shame because I can't believe it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's true. I pictured how I would kill my father, and
Wow.
brought my cutlery or my mom's cutlery into the bed, and thinking like if my dad came to bed, I would stab him. But you know, I would think like, well, okay, there's lots of ribs in my chest or in one's chest. And how do you stab one in the dark with lots of ribs? And plus it was a butter knife because we weren't allowed to play with sharp knives. And,
Yeah, right.
you know, I
Wow.
thought the rat poisoning in the garage poisoning him. And that came from a murder she wrote from my
Yeah.
mom watching TV. I thought, oh, that's how I'm going to poison my dad. But I mean, it's pretty tragic. I mean, and that's
Yeah.
called complete desperation to make something stop because the system just wasn't working for me.
Wow. Man. Well, and I know you say you feel some shame around that, but I think people listening to your story, including myself, completely understand why you went there with those kind of thoughts. I mean, why wouldn't you? I mean, here you are, this kid who at times feels completely hopeless and helpless. What other options, So no wonder you were thinking those things.
Yeah, it's
Wow.
just I have to say I did have an epiphany. And again, I don't know, never underestimate your children because it's amazing how their little minds will think. But I remember thinking, and so I was young, I don't
Yeah.
know, 9-ish, because I think I couldn't take it anymore. About like 9, 10, I just couldn't take it anymore. And I really started to act out, become violent. I started to behave just like my father. And in this thinking about taking out my father,
Yeah.
um, I realized it was a horrific thing. I thought, oh my goodness, I have become my father. I'm saying the same things as he is. I'm acting violent like he is. I have become the monster, another monster in the household. And
Yeah.
that's because it was all out of fear. I understood that. But then it was a conscious choice at that point. Uh, to really think about what I was going to become. Like, obviously, I couldn't stop up this force. So,
Right.
how could I turn this around? And how can I be different? And it really was the trigger point in my life where I thought, I got to be the opposite of my father. I got to do the opposite of what he says and what he does and
Yeah.
what he believes. And otherwise, he will take my will. He'll take everything that I have. And I was just like, he's not going to have it. You could have
Yeah.
any other part, but not my
Right.
soul, not my will. Like, you
Yeah.
cannot take this from me. This is mine. This was my
Man.
gift that I came into this earth, and this is mine. Whatever it is, you could break, but this is mine. And I remember thinking, I'm going to change. I'm going to really change. And then that started to trigger a little bit of a healing journey for me.
Yeah.
Um, but it was a very powerful, empowering moment as a kid. And I
Yeah, I
remember I
bet.
was just about 10 because just before that, we moved to Iran. My dad was a petroleum engineer, and we moved to
Mm.
Iran. And in Iran, my dad saw me as a woman, and he left me alone. So I was able to actually recreate myself because I went from trauma
Mhm.
to post-traumatic stress, and my brain shut down, and I forgot about what happened to me in my childhood. If you would have asked me any questions, I would have said, yeah, my childhood would have been great because I did not recall anything that happened to me from the past. Just
Wow.
I just knew that I didn't
Yeah.
know my father. And I still continued. I used to have this like mantra when I would be around my father or anybody who would capture my attention. I used to practice being the wallpaper. And I would say it over and over again:
Really?
be the wallpaper, be the wallpaper, be the wallpaper, you're the wallpaper, you're the wallpaper. Because I didn't want any attention brought to me because it only got me in trouble. So I silenced, I think, my voice, who I
Okay.
was,
Yeah.
but it was out of survival. And I think at least I was alive. I think that
Yeah.
was like a savings grace. I just wanted to survive.
Yeah. Wow. Man, I just as I'm hearing your story and just you actually personally talking about it, man, I can just feel it. It's the weight and on my own heart, just hearing you say this is tough to hear this. So you go through this, you move, I know we're jumping way ahead here a little bit with this question, but what I love what you said. You're like, he's not going to take this from me. I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to be the opposite of what he's doing. And here you are, this voice now, this vulnerable person sharing what you've been through. What got you to the point where you were willing to share this with the world? I mean, it's just that part to me just fascinates me, how open you are with this.
Um, it's kind of funny. I think through the years, I have done so much therapy. I
Mhm.
journaled. I did a lot of things to kind of save myself. And at 16, 17, I started to be sexually active, or definitely thinking about boys. I recognized that, like, hey, they're kind of cute. So I
Right.
think it opened up a whole new window. And in that, um, through dreams, a lot of my past came back in my journaling, and it
Mm,
sparked a lot of old memories, but I really couldn't believe that they were my memories. I thought it was like something that I watched, something that I read. And actually, I remember confronting my father and saying, did you do these things? Because this is what I'm dreaming. And my dad even said, well, I think it's a movie you saw. I think it's probably a book you read. Why would you accuse me of this? I'm such a good person. And through the charade, I asked my mom to, and she was like, why are you stirring things up in the household? Things are so great
yeah.
now. And through this thing, when I asked my parents, I recognized, and I felt it intuitively, that these were not just nightmares. This was my life.
Mhm.
And that's when I think, in this thing of trying to find afterwards, because I felt suicidal, I just couldn't believe, I couldn't deal with the pain that I
Yeah.
had unfolded in my journaling, that this was my life. And I felt dirty.
Yeah.
I was disgusted with myself. I just couldn't believe, I felt betrayed on, I just didn't believe, had betrayed, my belief system was torn
Yeah.
apart, everything that I knew. So from this part, I started to really try to find a way to heal. I lived, excuse me, at that time, I went to a high school in Spain. My mom she did not want to live in Saudi Arabia at that time, because the Shah was overturned, and Iran
Yeah.
was, you know, kind of going crazy over there. And so my dad took a job in Saudi Arabia, and my mom wanted to speak her native tongue. So we moved to Spain. And during this time, um, being a teenager in this amazing tourist town on the Mediterranean, I went through the darkest, deepest depression. And I would contemplate every day coming back from school, thinking about, like, how do I end this pain? And the only thing I could think about was jumping from my window, which is pretty
Mm,
drastic, but
yeah.
I just didn't know how to stop. I didn't want to hurt myself. I mean, and I knew then I love life. I think
Hmm.
I already knew that life was a gift, but I just wanted the pain to stop. And sometimes when I would listen to my teenage kids, and when they wanted things to stop, I would always relate to that part of my life and think about that, like, oh yeah, like, I get it. Like, you just want this to end and you don't know how to fix it. And I was looking for a solution, and I didn't turn to drugs or alcohol. It's not, I don't know, maybe I'm just not wired that way. I
Yeah.
think I just turned to that same thing that I found in the orchards, that higher, that that voice inside of me, that thing that I would meditate, that thing that I would
Yeah.
listen to. It was there. And I think that was sort of like a healing, that I started to find ways to heal, because I couldn't go to local libraries and find ways to heal. I was ashamed, I was embarrassed.
Yeah.
And in that process, I think I started to become a teenager, like all teenagers.
Yeah.
We're self-absorbed, we're
Yeah.
we're all about us, there's nothing else about us, there's nothing greater than us. And I think in that, I think I started to become very self-absorbed, which is a good thing. And I started about, like, I'm going to heal myself. Like, this is my journey. And in there, I think I started to find my voice a little bit. And as I started to get older and go through I've had so much more trauma that happened that was just uncontrollable. But through that, I found different parts of my voice through different parts of therapy, alternative. I'm so sorry about this. Through all of that, I started to find my voice, and it really didn't happen until I started to write Under the Orange Blossoms, which, by the way, was supposed to be a cookbook.
Yeah, I remember you talking about that. I watched your launch of your book, and which was beautiful, by the way, and just the way you spoke in front of everyone, it was amazing. But yeah, it's supposed to be a cookbook, but things changed, right?
It surely did. I love to cook. I love to entertain. And my daughter and I, we own an event company. And I thought,
Uh-huh.
oh, this is great. I'm going to write all these recipes down, and I'm going to put this all down in a book and get some tips on entertaining and fabulous entertaining. So as I'm writing all my recipes, going through, different countries,
Uh-huh.
different forms of abuse and
Yeah.
all this stuff, I'm writing them down in different notebooks because they kept them coming up. And there was one recipe, and that was, I was just a kid. It was Mrs. Anderson's grilled cheese sandwich. And I remember I used to run away all the time, and she would pick me up at the corner and say, okay, come on, Cindy, let's have a grilled cheese sandwich and a 7-Up. And I thought, oh gosh, like that was comfort food. And she would sit there and talk to me, and I have no idea what we talk about, but
Yeah.
that nurturing, from a tribe, whatever your tribe is, that really, it was like kind of like soul food, a grilled
Right.
cheese sandwich. And so from that, when I was looking at that, I thought, oh my gosh, I know what happened at 5. So I started to look through the journals again, and I thought, wow, out of all these books, one was on my son, who it was trauma. It was he was born with a rare brain tumor, and I had a lot of grief and unsettled things going on with that. And the other one was the sexual abuse, the physical abuse. And that was my childhood. And I really didn't share too much of that. It's not like I didn't. I mean, how do you talk about that at a party? Like, it just
Right.
doesn't come
It
up. You know what
doesn't
I
come
mean?
up. Right. Yeah.
It's kind of a downer. I mean, it's like, hi, I'm Cindy. And yeah,
Yeah.
it just doesn't happen. So
Right.
it only happens with your dear friends or someone close. And then it's really, how do you talk about trauma? Like, where do we find these times, and who do we trust? Even
Yeah.
as adults, who do we
Yeah.
trust?
Yeah. Wow. You know, again, you did end up doing this memoir, and obviously I understand more now why you called it, Under the Orange Blossoms, right? Because that's where you would go to find solace, to pound the dirt and to try to fit in with the trees and the dirt and everything that you were faced with. What what has come of, now that you've written this,
Mhm.
how therapeutic was that for you to actually put this in words and to basically publish it to the world?
Uh, so this is hard for a lot of people to believe, because they always think that writing your story has to be very cathartic.
Yeah.
And honestly, if I heard that, or if I watched somebody else, I thought I would think the same thing too. But I
Yeah.
believe that, being individuals, it was the opposite for me. It was extremely traumatic, because I do suffer from
Yeah.
post-traumatic stress disorder.
Okay.
And to go back into writing, you have to write everything. And then to protect your audience, you have to scale back and really find a way to write it that protects your audience, so that they could learn what they want to learn out of that. So
Yeah.
you have to go through a timeline of your entire life, all the different forms of trauma. And then you have to not only do that, but you have to say, what did the room look like? What was the color of the room?
Yeah.
Where did you feel the pain? What was hanging on the wall? What was the lighting of the room? What did they say? Go deeper into that. What was their intonation? You have to really dig deep. And in that process, I got triggered again. And I thought I shaken out every cobweb, every skeleton in my closet by that time. And I realized that you can re-traumatize yourself. I started having nightmares again.
Oh man.
And my husband, you know, he would stop me and he goes like, why are you doing this? You're going to make yourself like physically ill. Like, why are you doing this? And I kept on saying, and I still believe it to this day, I wouldn't recommend it, but I kept on thinking about me as a kid and how I did not have a role model, how I did not know that I was going to be successful in life. I didn't know simple tools of healing that you could do all on your own. And I kept on thinking, I couldn't have gone through all this trauma. And I really do believe that we are given things in life that are meant to be shared. I don't know if they are meant to be shared publicly,
Right.
but this one, because it happens out of 1 in 4 girls, 1 in 6 boys in here in America, those are reported cases, and that's epidemic proportions. And
Boy,
I
yeah.
felt, no, there is that girl, that woman, that mom, that father, that little boy, that teenager who is just finally awakening, coming into his own sexuality, trying to figure out who he is in the world. I thought, no, this is where I have to step up and find my voice and try to be the squeaky wheel and try to find other people who have walked a similar life and give them hope, because I found it the hard way. I would never want anybody to go through that again.
Right.
If I could prevent one person from going through the heartache that I've gone through, or just give them some form of hope, it was worth every re-traumatizing experience
Yeah.
again. And I have
Yeah.
a great partner. I mean, I have a great relationship right now. I have a lot to give.
Yeah.
My cup is definitely full. And so I want to give back. I think there's a lot of people out there who need to know that you can thrive, and you could thrive and be incredible, do amazing things in life, and you could still come back from a very troubled childhood, or something that's any form of trauma. It doesn't even have to be specifically sexual abuse. Any form of trauma, you can make it.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that one of your goals is to normalize speaking up about this.
Mm-hmm.
And not only just sexual abuse, but other abuses or anything else. And boy, when you say 1 in 4 girls go through this and 1 in 6 boys, and you're saying those are just the reported cases. I
Right.
mean, so we all know that number, it's probably 1 out of 2, and it's like, that is, scary to think about. But how lucky we are that we have you, in the sense of and even if you don't, I don't know what you think, how impactful you've been, but man, I'm telling you, you are making a wave here that's helping so many people. I mean, do you ever like look and go, wow, I can't believe I'm doing what I'm doing right now?
I felt, honestly, I've always wanted to do this, but I was too afraid. I think terrified.
Yeah.
I didn't even know how to, I could not, well, first of all, I think I've been so programmed not to speak out.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as I would talk, I would have like a post-traumatic stress syndrome, and I would just kind of freeze.
Yeah.
And so in doing this, I had to find a speech coach and kind of help me get through my fears and this phobia.
Mm,
And I thought I never could do it, but never say never. I think you could
right.
challenge yourself. I feel like in some ways, when you go through trauma, I feel like if I had to equate it to something that people could relate it to, it's like you have to change your mindset and challenge yourself, like really, truly challenge yourself. And
Yeah.
if I had to relate it to something, I feel like if I was an Olympian,
Uh-huh.
that I don't know. I heard that you're a runner.
Yeah.
Is that right? Yes.
Yeah, I
Okay.
do. Yeah, I do races and stuff from time to time. Yeah.
Well, say for example, if that was all that you knew was how to run, and somebody took that away from you and they said, okay, now you're going to be your new sport, your new thing is going to be rock climbing, if that was an Olympic sport. And you
Yeah.
have to find a way to do rock climbing. You're thinking, well, I'm afraid of heights. I can never do that.
Yeah.
I like, how do you put your hands up there? Where do I place my feet? There's a lot of vision work that goes into that. Like, and that's what I feel like this has been my calling, probably. Maybe this is what put me here on earth, is to speak out about this. But I really do feel like I'm being called and challenged to step up to the plate to help others. And I really do wholeheartedly believe that.
I love that. That was beautifully said, Cindy. You know, it reminds me of a quote by Pablo Picasso that says, the meaning in life is to find your gift. The purpose in life is to give it away.
Mm.
And that's really what you're doing. And despite that you had to go through some really horrific things to get there, it's pretty cool that that you're doing that now. So you have it's called, you're the founder of CindyTalks.
Right.
And I think one of the most amazing things that inspire me about you is that, one, I think the thing that stands out the most is your vulnerability to talk about this. Although it's been obviously a challenge to get to that point, but I mean, you've interviewed your kids about this. You actually even interviewed your own father
I did.
about this. I mean, come on. I saw that and I watched that. I could not believe just the courage it took for you, first of all, to even being willing to do something like that. And I'm blown away by that.
Well, that honestly, so, oh wow, I know a lot of people feel different about this, but
Yeah.
this is my story.
Yeah.
So, in doing what I felt was best,
Yeah.
later
sure.
on, my dad, as he was aging, I really didn't have a good relationship with my dad, but as he was aging, um, and I think my father and I were like, I always say like oil and vinegar or fire and butane. I mean, whatever he said, I just like, it just did not resonate with me. And I was always very vocal with him.
Yeah.
But when he got into his older years and he was pretty much isolated, I remember my mom being angry. They divorced later on, way later on.
Yeah.
And her saying, you're going to be a lonely old man. And I remember thinking like, well, that's between them. But I remember thinking, ouch, mom, like that's pretty tough. But, that's their business. And
Yeah.
and I saw my dad, by that time he was mixing his medicines, he wasn't sure how to organize them right. And the hospital called about 10 times. And I was the executor. And so that's why they were always calling me. And by that time, my son was a teenager. I have a special needs son. And he was going through, like all teenagers, it's hard being a teenager.
Yeah.
It's
Right. Yeah.
not a fun process to go through.
Yeah.
All
Right.
my other kids were adult children, moved out of the house, and I really wanted to focus on my son. My dad's ill, and I thought, gosh, maybe it's at this point where I have to take care of my dad, and I can't do it every day on the phone. So I actually moved him 5 minutes away from me, and I did it for myself.
Yeah.
I also did it because I knew it was the right thing to do. And I did get a little bit of pushback from family, like, why would you do
I
this?
bet. Yeah.
My kids were like, why would you do this, mom? This is crazy. And I'm like, it's not about him. This is about me. And I also have to do what's right for my heart. And
Yeah.
it's harder for me to ignore something. That's way too much energy for me to ignore something. I'd rather address it and address it my way. And my dad was willing to take my help. And I moved him back from California over here to Washington, and I took care of him. And in that process, I was able to kind of get to know him as an older guy. And he was a lot different than he was when he was younger. First of all, he's in a walker and in a diaper, so obviously very different, but his nature was different. And I was an adult. my 50s at that time.
Yeah.
And I did ask him, like, hey, Dad, why did you do this? Like, because I might have asked him 1,000 times. I have asked him different ways, and he always denied it. And when he was in the nursing home, I asked, and again, my dad's walking around, so
Yeah.
he just needed some management with his care.
Yeah.
And later on, he ended up in a diaper and in a walker. Sorry that I spoke out of turn, but that was not very nice. So anyway, he he said, I said, why, Dad? Why did you do this? Because he was surprised that I was the one to take care of him at the end. And he said,
Okay.
well, I have to say, I was during the war in Germany, I was raped by soldiers. And I remember looking at him thinking, oh, wow. So he did what he did not like, and he did that to me. So he repeated the cycle. And I thought, well, that doesn't justify his actions.
Right.
And I thought, well, okay, that's something. Like, that's the first time I heard anything about this.
Yeah. Right.
And I started talking to him a lot more. And then I started journaling, just going back to what I used to. And then I said, Dad, can I record this? Because I'm almost kind of feeling ill or sick about this, that I just want to make sure that I'm not crazy and that I've made this up. Can I record this? So then I started recording him, and he would talk about it. And in that process, it was really hard. I would go home, I get in the car often, I cry, just
Yeah.
hearing his truth. I recognized how ill he was. Um, I kind of, I just couldn't believe that this was my life. And I had no idea to what depth, how ill he was. And mentally, I'm saying.
Right.
And
For sure.
through that, I thought, I wonder if somebody else would need to hear this, maybe like a
Yeah.
medical professional. Maybe they
Right.
would need to hear this, or maybe there would be some person out there who would need to hear maybe like a mindset of a predator. So I started doing this, and I said, Dad, I think I'm going to write a book about this. I think I'm going to write a book about this. And I said, I thought it was going to be a cookbook, but I think it's going to be about this. And
Yeah. Wow. That's
I think
amazing.
it's going to be about our life, and maybe we could change some things. Maybe you could take the wrong and turn this into a positive, into a good
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that gave him peace. I don't know in his
Yeah.
passing.
Yeah.
Um, it seemed to.
Yeah. I'm sure it helped on some level. I mean, honestly, but man, that's pretty courageous of you to do what you did.
Well, I would come home and cry. It wasn't,
I'm sure.
I would come home and cry. I definitely am a truth seeker. I'll poke and prod until I could get the truth. I am
Yeah.
definitely, no matter if I hear it, if I could hear the facts, then I could do something with the facts.
Yeah. Wow. Well, it's so impressive. If, there's probably a lot of people, I know a lot of my followers have been through some really difficult things, including sexual abuse. If there's someone listening to you right now, Cindy, that's kind of in that place, they're in this dark place, maybe they haven't shared it with anyone and they feel alone. You've already shared some amazing things, but what would you tell that one person right now who's in that dark place? What would you say?
That they're not alone, that there's more people like them than they think.
Hmm.
Um, to find people that you could trust, start slowly, talk to people. I think that's the first step. I don't know if I would reach out to family first. I would start with friends. Family is a completely different dynamic.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of times, if you're changing and you're trying to improve yourself, your family, they don't know you as the other person. So
Right.
they're going to possibly not like the changes that are in you, and you may revert back, or you may get silenced in that process. So
Yeah.
I would start with friends. There's also fabulous counselors out there who take sliding scale. Um, the best results I ever got was through a trauma therapist.
Okay.
I thought they
Great. Yeah.
just knew how to specialize in trauma. And
Yeah.
since I suffer from PTSD, I found a lot more self-regulation and boundaries with that, and a lot more healing. I think they really focused on that.
Yeah.
But I had to start slow and go to different kinds of therapists. I would also tell people who are going to explore different kinds of therapy that you are in control, that it's your
Mhm.
therapists are there to aid and help you. But if you don't resonate with your therapist, it's like a marriage. I mean, you're sharing very personal
Yeah.
information.
Right. Yeah.
You know what? You could just say, "Hey, this doesn't work for me. Do you have
Yeah.
anybody else?" And
Yeah.
they are more than they're allies. They're looking to
Yeah.
help.
For sure.
And, if you're with a therapist for a long, long time and you're thinking, well, I'd like to switch up, your therapist is more than happy to
Yeah.
help you find another person, or you could try different techniques, and you're in control. It's not the other person. And I think when you've come from abuse or any kind of abuse, that authority is that sometimes we give things up to authority, but you have to recognize that you are in control. You're in control of your body, you're in control of your mind, you're in control of your heart and your soul, and you could change your own mindset. You make that happen.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily somebody else. Those are tools that they're giving you, but it's a choice to change your own mindset, and that you can make it through. And wholeheartedly, I know you can. Without a
Yeah.
doubt, I know you can.
Yeah. Well, you're living proof, Cindy, and that was beautifully said. Thank you for sharing that. If someone wants to reach out to you, Cindy, and get a copy of your book, learn more about Cindy Talks, and just kind of where you're going with all of this, and maybe just to even ask you some advice, what would be the best way for them to do that?
I really encourage people to reach out to me. So I have a blog. It's www.cindy, CINDY, talks, TALKS.com. And in the blog, I share stories other people write in. They ask for advice. Um, it could be therapeutic advice. They just might want to reach out and just say, "Hey, this happened to me too." Whatever it is, reach out to me. Those who are listening to this, who want to find solutions to maybe have more open conversations to find solutions to our broken system. I
Yeah.
don't have those solutions. I'm just a squeaky voice in the crowd, and I would love to collaborate with
Yeah.
others who can make some changes.
Yeah.
And because I think changes need to be made.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I encourage anyone listening to reach out to you, especially if you have gone through similar things and you don't know where to go. Cindy would be a great resource for that. I will put that your link to your website and your blog in the show notes so they can get right there. I
Okay.
do want to share one more quote from your book, if that's
Sure.
okay. It's by Shannon Alder that says, "Courage doesn't happen when you have all the answers. It happens when you're ready to face the questions you have been avoiding your whole life."
Mm.
Wow. And when I read that, I was like, dang, how appropriate for all of us. I mean, whether you've been through abuse or not, but it's a lot of times, we find the answers when we're ready to face the questions, and those kind of things. And anyway, your book's amazing. You're amazing. I feel honored and blessed to be sitting here listening to your story firsthand. And I don't know, I just can't thank you enough for taking some time with us today.
Oh, thank you, Todd. I have to say, what I like about your podcast the most, I like the fact that you talk about their story, but a lot of times trying to find a solution or trying to find a way through, and you focus on that. And I think that's like, I wish I would have had you as a kid. I wish I would have had you as a young teenager or a mom growing up. Like, I wish I would have heard your stories. Like, that's like you're reaching other people. And I think
Oh,
that's what we
thanks.
just need to find, the
Yeah.
light. We just need to find ways and hear other people's stories.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, I think life happens for us. And I see all that you have been through and it's unfortunate, but yet look what you're doing now. And now people listen to you because of what you went through. So, and it's kind of like my story too. Mine was addiction that I went through and now I've got a voice in that direction. And now it's expanded to things that we were talking about today with you. So it really does happen for us. Sometimes, like you said, we don't know why we're going through it, but I look back and I wouldn't change a thing. And had I not been through what I've been through, I wouldn't be talking to Cindy today. And I just feel so blessed.
Ditto. Seriously. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you so much, Cindy. And Benezra, did I say that right?
Benezra, yeah.
Benezra, I did it right. Cindy Benezra. So everyone who's listening, please reach out to her, CindyTalks.com. Please check out all that she's doing. If you have someone that you think might be struggling with this or anything, share a link of this episode with them. It'll open up some dialogue and maybe, they'll get the help that they need. And I can't thank you enough for supporting this. And Cindy, one last thank you to you. You're amazing. And I'm grateful to know you now.
Grateful too. Thank you so much, Todd.
You bet. Again, thanks to my sponsors and thanks for all of you tuning in. I love you guys. You truly are the best. Until next time, take care.